Hello, guys. I am back with another episode. There is a message that was forwarded to me by one of our admins. This comes from a translation that was sent to us by one of our listeners. The message reads like this: Hello, how are you? Can you please post for me as anonymous? My grandfather was a ritualist. I am writing this to you whilst I am all tears. I cannot stop crying because I just discovered the family secret that has been kept from me from a very long period, and all along, all of my family members, they claimed that everything that I was seeing, it was because of drugs. My brother, this whole thing started when I was still in primary school. I used to see dead people, my brother, and all of these people that I used to see since I was still in primary school, those people, when they would speak with me, they would say that my grandfather was the reason why they had died. And those people, sometimes whenever they would come to me, they'll be so violent towards me. Most of these dead people that I would see, they'll be covered in blood. My grandfather was a businessman who had a lot of cows, shops and taxis. My grandfather was someone who really loved me so much. Of all his grandchildren, he loved me so much. I was the only one amongst his grandchildren who was staying in Joburg with my parents. The rest of the family members, they all stayed back in KwaZulu-Natal. When I was in high school now in Joburg, that is when my own mother told me that all the things that I thought I was seeing were not there. They even took me to a psychologist just to prove a point that I was just having hallucinations. And all of these things that happened to me since I was in primary school until I was in high school, it just destroyed me. I managed to pass my matric, then I went to varsity. But when I was in varsity, that is when I started to see those dead people in reality. When I was in high school, I used to have a lot of dreams of dead people. Those people, some of them, they would come to me, they'll be holding a gun, it will be a blooded gun. Then that person will say, "This is the gun that shot me, and you are the reason why I am dead." Then that person will start to chase me in my dreams. When I was in varsity, I think I took about a year without ever getting into a taxi, because whenever I would try to get into a taxi, I would see someone sitting in front of me. If I would sit at the front, if I were to look back to the other passengers, I would see that amongst those passengers, there will be someone with a lot of blood. That person will be having blood on their shirt or on their face. I was so used to all of this, so much that I would not scream because I was ashamed that people would say that I am crazy. This is what my own mother, the woman who gave birth to me, told me. She said that if you ever see these people that you claim to see, please do not make a scene out of it. You have to know that all of these things that you are seeing, they are in your head. They said that I was just having a lot of hallucinations. Even now, Brother Nashi, the reason why I can't even get involved with any woman, it is because they gave me a lot of medication. I was always at the doctor's office, and the doctors were always prescribing a lot of medication to me. So I think that all the medication that I took ever since I was just a small boy, those medication affected me so much that when I am with a woman, my manhood doesn't do anything. I have feelings for women, but my manhood doesn't do anything. My grandfather was a very traditional man who loved his ancestors, and now and then he would make us prepare beer so that we can appease the spirits, and he loved to talk with those that were long gone. He was feared in the whole village, and he didn't hesitate to send a man to come and shoot and kill. I still remember that all of these ceremonies that my grandfather used to do, whenever we would have finished doing all of these ceremonies, my grandfather, most of the nights, he would call me and he would tell me that I should get into his car, but he would just drive with me from this village to the next village. Then when we will get to the mountains, that is when you would get out of the car with some of that traditional beer that you would have taken from the ceremony. But he would never touch that beer. He always gave me an instruction on what to do with that beer. Most of the nights, he would take out a knife out of his car, and always that car will be full of blood. I don't know if the blood that will be on that knife, it will be cow's blood or human blood. I don't know. But what I know is that you would just give me instructions on what to do. I had to pour some beer on that knife that will be full of blood. Then he will tell me that we need to climb down the mountain. But the way that we will be climbing down the mountain, it was really scary because my grandfather will start to behave in a violent way. We will get down the mountain so fast, and he will say that do not look back, as if we were running from whatever the thing that wanted to drink the beer that we would have poured on that knife that will be full of blood. My grandfather, he had a lot of cows that were not allowed to be milked, and not everyone was allowed to take care of the cows. My uncles told me that some people said that he sacrificed one of his own son, and my uncle was buried in the kraal where no one was allowed to enter, and he kept his special vows in that kraal. Now my story is not about his rituals, but it is about me. It's about what was done to me that really breaks my heart. I always wondered why every time that I asked my mom about who my father was, my mom will get extremely angry. I felt like it was my right as a child to know who my father was, because when the man that I thought was my real father, whenever you would get angry, he would say that you are not my child. Sometimes when he's drunk, he would want to tell me the truth, but my mom will get so angry, so much angry that my mom would drag my father into the bedroom, then lock him up in the bedroom until we will be sober. Early in the morning, my grandfather would come. There were many nights when I would hear my grandfather hitting my father. But recently, one of my uncles told me everything that happened to me. Back in the village, when my grandfather was still alive, my grandfather, sometimes he would love me, sometimes he would hate me so much. And whenever he would be hating me, he would hit me with that sjambok made of leather. I used to wonder, why did everyone hate me so much? When I was in the city, grandfather, wherever he would go, he wanted to go with me. I had witnessed a lot of people being attacked, especially by some guys who used to come to my grandfather's place, because my grandfather, he used to love to stay with me when we were in Joburg. My grandfather was someone who didn't hesitate to hurt someone, especially if you have a taxi or if you tried to steal some roots from him. I remember very well that there was this other time he told me that I should accompany him, and he was driving a white Cressida. It was those old white Cressidas. He loved his car. So we went into this bushy area and he left his car there, but he left his car with another man who was guarding the car. Then we got into this Quantum. Those were the days when the Quantum taxis were still new on the road. When we got into that car, I was really shocked because there was another man who was sleeping in that taxi. That man had been beaten so much, and that man was asking for forgiveness from my grandfather, but I don't know where they went with that man because my grandfather didn't say anything, but we drove for a couple of kilometers until we returned back. Then we got back into that Cressida and my grandfather, he drove back home. But I don't know what the other driver and the other man who used to work with my grandfather did with the man that I had seen lying in that Quantum taxi. He had blood all over his face. When my uncle told me this story, he just told me over the phone, so I had to quickly drive back to KZN so that I can hear if this thing, it was the truth. It has been 10 years since my grandfather has passed away. One day, one of my uncles sent me a message on Facebook and he just said, "Do you know that you are your grandfather's son?" I just said, "What?" So my mother is my sister, my grandfather is my father, and my father is my brother. This whole thing truly hurt me. So I traveled back to KZN and I sat down with my uncle. That is when my uncle apologized. At first, he tried to deny it, and he said that everything that he had wrote to me on Facebook, it was because he was drunk. But then I called all of my relatives and I made a screenshot and I sent those screenshots to my mother and to everyone. When my relatives saw that I now knew the truth, that is when they decided to have a family meeting. And this is the truth. I was then told by my other uncle, after I was driving him back to the village where he stays, he just said, "Son, you just have to know that these things, they do happen. You don't have to feel sorry. You have to know that it was not your choice for you to be born in such a way, but these things, they do happen. A lot of families, they keep their own secrets. It's only that they don't go around telling everyone their secrets." My uncle, as we were traveling back to the village where he stays, he told me that it was a ritual that had gone wrong and they tried so hard to do an abortion, but it failed. A couple of times, my own mother had tried to have me aborted, but it just failed. I can't stop crying. This shows me why everyone hated me so much. As for now, I feel like I hate my own family. I feel like I hate my own mother. I hate my grandfather. The only one that I love is my grandmother, because whenever I think about her, when she was still alive, whenever my grandfather would try to be violent towards me, sometimes my grandmother would run and stand between me and my grandfather so that he would not hit me. My mother is happy and she never bothers about me. My mother only cried once when we were having this family meeting, but when my mother and my father returned back to Johannesburg, they continued with their lives as if this whole thing does not exist. I wanted to know what my mother was feeling, but she never said anything. This whole thing pains me a lot, to think that the man that I thought was my father is my brother, and the woman that I call my mother, she is my sister-in-law. She is a daughter-in-law to the man who I thought was my grandfather, but is my father. It is so confusing to me. What should I do? Should I forgive my grandfather? Should I forgive my mother? At least she should have told me. Should I forgive my father for mistreating me all these years? Here and there, I still remember that there were times when my father wanted to tell me the truth, but my mother would stop him from telling me the truth. Should I just walk away and pretend that I never heard of this secret? Yo, dear listeners, right there was a message that was forwarded to me by one of our admins. This message comes from a translation, hoping that the story was not lost in translation. Please let us talk about this issue in the comment section.